Labour has made no secret of its desire to involve big business in the running of the state. In the party's new manifesto, the word business occurs 60 times, 3 times as often as the word worker. And Starmer isn't just looking to build connections to the private sector through deals once Labour are elected. While Labour has dropped left-wing candidates like Faiza Shaheen and Lloyd Russell Moyle for not being, quote, the highest possible quality candidates, it's found a new crop of potential MPs from one very select group, lobbyists for big business. Let's take a look at a few of them. Gareth Barrett is an associate director of PR firm Hill and Knowlton, a giant American public relations company that works with Shell and the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative. That's the coalition of oil and gas companies that includes BP, ExxonMobil, and Chevron. Barrett's firm has been described as the main lobbying communications firm for the oil industry by campaign group Clean Creatives, used by oil companies to, quote, spin, delay, and mislead in order to continue expanding fossil fuel production and thereby increasing heat-trapping emissions. Charming. Currently a councillor for Brentwood South, Barrett is standing in the Essex seat of Brentwood and Ongar. Julie Mintz has been a freelance communications consultant since 2019. Between 2014 and 2016, she worked for PR firm Bell Pottinger as a partner in its political team. Founded by Sir Tim Bell, Thatcher's favoured PR advisor, Bell Pottinger shut in 2017 after it ran a secret campaign, not so secret, for its billionaire clients to stir up racial tension in South Africa. Last September, Private Eye revealed Mintz had attempted to cover up her past lobbying work with her Labour website, referring to her 20-year stint in PR as when I worked in industry. Now she's standing for Labour in Carlisle. Jade Botterill is director at the lobbying firm Portland. On her website, Botterill says this: in my professional life, I work to support vital local and national campaigns, like holding water companies to account when they pollute our seas and rivers. Yet Portland's clients include well-known polluter Southern Water, which was fined £90 million in 2021 for widespread sewage dumping. Now, Botterill doesn't list her job at Portland on her LinkedIn or her website, but she does mention her previous job as advisor for Yorkshire Water, another big polluter. She's standing for Labour in New West Yorkshire constituency of Ossett and Denby Dale. Polly Billington is a senior advisor at lobbying firm Hanover Communications. Hanover lobbies on behalf of Amazon, Uber, Meta, and the London Stock Exchange Group, among many others. In January, Billington chaired a meeting in Hanover's offices with Labour's shadow climate change chief, Kerry McCarthy, and industry reps from energy, manufacturing, and transport. That's according to a report by Open Democracy. She is now standing for Labour and East Thanet. And where to start? With our old pal Luke Akehurst. He worked for global PR company Weber Shandwick for 11 years. Akehurst now uses those hard-won lobbying skills in his position as director of We Believe Israel. That's a pro-Israel lobbying organisation, part of the British Israel Communication and Research Centre, known as BICOM. Foreign affairs specialists have described BICOM as the most persistent and slickest media operations in the battle for influence over opinion formers. At the same time as lobbying for Israel, Akehurst held a seat on Labour's National Executive Committee, essentially selecting candidates for this election. And luckily, he was selected himself. As a reward for his services, he is now standing in the safe Labour seat of North Durham. And until last month, Chris Ward was a director at Hanbury Strategy, a lobbying firm set up by former advisors to David Cameron. While there, Ward ran the Labour unit with ex-Angela Rayner aide Joe Moore. Ward has also been Keir Starmer's political advisor, deputy chief of staff, and deputy campaign manager. So many jobs. No doubt that connection came in handy when he was helping clients to, quote, navigate what could be the next government. Those clients included Amazon, Deliveroo, gambling company Flutter, and finance firms UBS and Blackstone. They also included UK oil company Rockhopper, which won £210 million after it sued the Italian government in 2022 for compensation following the introduction of a ban on offshore drilling. God almighty, we are screwed. Ward is now standing for Labour in Brighttown, Kemp Town, which was Lloyd Russell Moyle's seat. And I mentioned former Angela Rayner aide and Hanbury advisor Joe Morris there. He's also standing for Labour in Hexham, Northumberland, a very charming town that I've been to. Might even be a city. It's got a cathedral. Also standing is Hanbury Associate Director Hannah Dawson, who's running for the Winchester seat, and Hanbury Account Manager Joss Tapper running for Labour in Hertsmere, Hertfordshire. Elena, How has lobbyist become the latest career that predicts a desirable politician?
It's interesting that you brought up the Portland consultancy with one of these candidates very specifically, especially one of the people high up in the company, at the very least, because the Portland consultancy was set up by a former aide of Tony Blair during the Blair years, and just very recently in 2023, had a document on their website called "How Labour Works." It had a foreword by Alistair Campbell, and it was helped being written by a former political editor of the Sun. And what this was a document that broke down the inner workings of the Labour Party for businesses who wanted to engage with Labour. And it essentially was a guide on how to lobby the Labour Party for people in industry, people in the business sector. And part of this, it described the internal split within the Labour Party between those who believe that Labour should be a mass movement of members to be able to fight for workers as part of a movement of people, and the more moderate, quote unquote, half of the party who want it to be a credible force of government and would make concessions to be able to enable that as best as possible. And now, within that grouping, there are moderate people, there are soft left people who view this as rather a necessary evil, who think, well, if we want to make progressive change, unfortunately, there are forces against us, and therefore we must at least make concessions to them and work with them to ensure that we get into government to be able to make those changes. And whilst I disagree with them, I would much rather Labour was a mass movement of people fighting vested interests and really taking reins of power away from them. I can at least understand why the moderate left, soft left people see this as some kind of necessary evil. But then, of course, the Alistair Campbells of this world are firmly part of the Labour right, the entrists of the Labour right who really, quote unquote, changed the party in the kind of Tony Blair era. The people who full throatedly believed that all of politics was a game. These people are fundamentally people who are right wingers who joined Labour because it was a path towards political careers, not necessarily because they believed in social democracy or socialism or the Labour movement at all, but it was one of the main two parties in the country. And even as a liberal, you can't really join the Liberal Democrats as a political career because they're not a political fighting force. And so they've joined the party. These entrists joined the party and try to take it away from its roots. They will court the major donors, as we've seen recently, the first time in a very, very long time, where donors from individual rich people have surpassed, for example, donations from the trade union movement, therefore shifting the direction of the party and who indeed it serves. Are they donating because they want return on investment, or is it just a natural thing? They want what's best for the country. It's just a charitable nation. Nothing wrong there. And of course, once you get into this kind of this right wing place where political careerists take what they believe to be the steps they need to ensure that they get into government to be able to enact what they want to see done. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they want to be able to make as many business connections as possible? And the best way of doing that is by giving these people direct political power, by getting these people who have loads of connections with business, who want to make decisions in behalf of vested interests because they believe that's the best way to maintain political power. Make them MPs, make them members of your government, rather than having people on the outside having to be given documents how to interact with a membership, that this very Portland document described as a problem to be managed rather than people to be included, to try and undermine the membership when it came to setting policy, and instead have this policy outsourced to these kind of groups like the TBI and Labour together, who are working with these same lobbyists to ensure that they maintain power by not challenging vested interests. And what's happened as a result of that? Politics has become one big club where people who used to work for David Cameron are now introducing Rachel Reeves. People who are married to people who used to be Conservative MPs are now doing lobbying jobs or becoming Labour Party MPs. There is this political class, whereas we on the populist left believe that the political class should be, gotten rid of. We should be replacing them with people who represent people. They believe in the opposite. They want to close the doors to political opportunity and ensure that their group, their clique, has dictatorial control. And of course, the moderate and soft left, for example, because of their belief in the greater good and the necessary concessions, they have no means to fight against this. And of course, I believe that this door will get closed for regular people for a very, very long time, because as we've seen, these are also the people who have control over selections. The one inputting their friends who have connections in industry to maintain political power are also the ones ensuring that regular working people get taken off the lists for who can be MPs, because otherwise this continual consensus within who the Labour Party is there to govern for might get broken within the PLP. We can't be having that.
We just showed you a handful of Labour's lobbyist candidates, but there are actually far far more. On novaramedia.com today, reporter Polly Smythe has published a rundown of 31 Labour candidates with links to corporate lobbying. The link for that article is in the description box below.